Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I just want to make sure we were on. I think there's probably still some. Hello.
On Dan. That one Sarah sent out. Okay. Jen, you had sent your vacation request to Janet? No. Did you approach her? I just asked her if I could split my vacation up, but that's all I asked.
Hello, everyone. I think we're still having some people join us. This is Jennifer Berry. I'm the presenter today. But I still hear some people clicking in, and I still see some people joining online. So we'll just wait another minute. If everybody can use *6 to mute your phone, that will get rid of all the background noise. And then, of course, you're welcome to speak up at any time. But if we keep muted, then everyone should be able to hear me. Thank you. So I think we'll get started. I don't hear too much more clicking in. If you are having any troubles hearing, you can always use the chat to let us know. And if you prefer to use the chat to ask questions, that's perfectly fine too. If you type the questions in to me or to everyone, I'll be able to see them. I think there are still a couple people who may not be muted. So if you're not muted, make sure you do mute. And this is the second part of our Selling Strategies webinar. So the first one was 2 weeks ago, for those of you who were here. And hopefully we've had lots of people come back. So as you join, please make sure you use *6 to mute your line. Just a review of the agenda that we will cover today. We're going to do a little review of last time. We'll talk about, in more detail, the unique selling proposition, the ideal client, the pitch itself. If you're just joining, please make sure you use *6 to mute your line, because we're hearing a lot of clunking and keyboard. Great, sounds quiet now. Then we'll talk about questions and the power of questions, resilience and buoyancy, very important. A little bit on the terms upselling and cross-selling, and then cover testimonials and referrals as sales tools. Again, if anyone does have questions as we go through, feel free to ask or type them into the chat. What we covered in session 1 was what is selling. We talked about how selling can get a negative reputation in the history of people thinking of used car salespeople and how sales has changed. We talked about shifting our thoughts. Instead of selling stuff to people, the idea of moving, persuading, and influencing people. And although some of us don't have external customers specifically, we all have selling to do in our job. We all try to move people to our point of view. So we may have internal customers, and we can and should use all the same strategies to achieve those internal goals. we briefly introduced the idea of the ideal client and the unique selling proposition, and then talked about the blockers that could stop us from selling. I did give you some homework to consider over the 2 weeks, and for those of you who did, I asked you to notice when you are influencing or persuading people in your day-to-day work, to notice which of your own personal strengths you use for this, and what happens when you're successful, and how does that feel, and then what happens when you're not. I suggested keeping a journal, a notebook, or a file to track the time you spend on these types of activities and the results you achieve. So if we understand that everybody's always doing some level of selling, this could be an interesting activity. So if you did this homework, did you notice? What did you notice? Will you continue to take note of these activities? Sometimes writing these things down or tracking them in your own way can help you identify skills you didn't realize you had, can also help you measure your success, and can help you identify areas that you want to improve on. So if anybody is interested in sharing, either by speaking out or by typing in the chat room anything you noticed doing this, or if not, I'll just wait and then we'll move on. Even if you didn't do it in the past 2 weeks, it's a great way to just be aware and take note in the future. So I wanted to just go back to this slide that we used last time that asked the question, what stops you from selling? And we talked about fear of being rejected, fear of making the call, fear of making the ask, and also the idea that there will be objections. And so if I propose my solution or idea or the thing I'm trying to sell and people object, then what do I do? So what I wanted to ask for you to think about, even if you don't want to share, is what makes you great at selling. So knowing that we're going to use our strategies, we're going to make sure we know the ideal client, we're going to know our pitch, we're going to know what we have that's unique. Which skills, which personal skills do you personally have that makes you able to go ahead and do the work of selling or moving or persuading someone? So if you think about your own work day to day over the past couple weeks, what makes you great? And I wanted to share, as you think about this is the list we built together that was words to describe excellent salespeople. So some of us or all of us thought that these words describe excellent salespeople. So it's worthwhile thinking about yourself. And I will read through these words. And if one of these words or more of these words describes you, then that's the kind of skill you want to lean on when you're put in the position to sell. So are you energized, approachable, talkative, honest? Can you think on your feet? Are you quick to accept no and move on? That gets to that resilience piece that I mentioned. Are you confident? Are you knowledgeable? And we had knowledgeable and then we had know their product. So I think we would all agree that knowledge, a strong knowledge of what you're trying to sell or promote is important. Are you dedicated? Do people say you're a good listener? Do you have a good read on people? And do you have high integrity? So probably all of us can pick a few of these that we say, yeah, that's something people say about me. So when we talk about using our strengths, these are the strengths, some of the strengths we'd want to pull on. So I know it's not the best format for sharing, but I also wanted to ask if there are others that people have thought of, other words that would be the skills we need to be good at sales that anyone wants to share. And you could type those in or speak them out. I think this is a pretty good list. I think being a good listener and being resilient are probably the ones that stand out the most to me. So we'll just keep that in mind for each of us to think about individually as we move on. The first topic that I really want to dig into is the ideal client and the unique selling proposition, or the USP. You'll hear people say unique selling point. There's other, the P often gets changed, unique selling principle, but the idea is what is it that you can do or your product or service does absolutely better than anyone else. And it's important to be able to identify that one thing. And people who are very successful do this well. The ideal client, again, as I briefly introduced last time, you can't sell everything to everyone. So defining your ideal client narrows your market and helps you focus. It's important to focus because the world, whether it's business to business or business to consumer, it's vast. So if we're trying to sell to everyone, our chances of success are quite low. So based on your own company history, assumptions, who's the best possible target customer? And then, again, what do you do better than everybody else? It sounds like someone may not be on mute, so if everyone just make sure you have *6 for mute, that would be great. So I want to show you a couple examples of the identification of ideal clients. I think some of you will recognize one of these for sure. So this is a few years old now, but cool, good-looking people. Does anyone know, you can see here I gave you the name Mike Jeffries, but good-looking people attract other good-looking people, and we want to market to cool, good-looking people. So he said this, and the company took a lot of heat for this. They've changed their tactic a little bit since then. But does anyone want to call out who this is or type it in? It's Abercrombie & Fitch. And they were, the idea of targeting cool, good-looking people is an excellent ideal target. Sharing that publicly as a brand or marketing statement may not have been their smartest move. However, maybe the controversy helped them. I'm sure we could all find case studies that would give us a lot of details on this, but what I wanted to share is that cool, good-looking people, however and then underneath that, they would have very clearly defined age, gender, where they live, what they do, what they read, and they would know really specifically who these cool, good-looking people are, and then everything they do would target them. That's their ideal client. So again, we're not selling to everyone, we're selling to a specific group. Now the next one, also clothing. This is the case where they want to sell to a new client. This isn't the client they've sold to in the past. They're targeting a woman who is 40 years old, has one child and another one on the way. She's time-starved and looking for reasonable priced fashions. And this is their actual ad picture here. Now this 40 years old, has one child, that's not their advertisement, that's not their public statement. Unlike Abercrombie & Fitch, they didn't go and say this, but this is an internal descriptor of who they're targeting. So this one, you may know who this is. I think the picture really, to me, jumps out as who they are, but this is Sears. So Sears has traditionally marketed to Linda. I didn't put in a picture of Linda, but she's the she's the old Sears target. She's over 50. She has 2 grown children, and she has an ingrained practice of shopping at Sears. She is a loyal Sears customer. She's always shopped at Sears. But they don't have enough Lindas anymore, so they want to get the Amy's. So again, so that takes out, they're not targeting men. They're not targeting young women. They're very clear on who exactly they're targeting. And I brought this one in as an example because you don't always have just one ideal client. In this case, they have Amy and they have Linda, and they'd have a different tactic to sell to each of them. So moving on to the unique selling proposition. This answers the question, why should I choose you instead of your competitors? So this one, it usually is quite clear. It's not always a slogan, but sometimes it's a slogan. So the unique selling proposition 1 is, we give a new pair of shoes to a child in need for every pair you purchase. So now most people would know this, and other companies have come along doing the same thing. But originally, this was a very unique idea. It was Tom's shoes, and there's a little picture of Tom's shoes. It was appealing to a very specific client, and I didn't have their internal document on what an ideal client would be. But knowing what I know, I would guess that their ideal client would be at a certain socioeconomic level, to have a certain amount of money to spend more on the shoes, knowing that they were doing good, that they were making the world a better place. And so that the financial ability to buy the shoes, the concern for doing something perceived to be good, and then also the certain style, a person who would want to wear that style of shoe. So that's their, at that, I think now they're not the only one, but at that time that was a very unique selling proposition. And the second one I think most people know was a huge case study in business schools and a huge success for them, were number 2, We Try Harder. So they knew they were not the number 1 rental car company, they were number 2. And the proposition was, because we're number 2, we work harder than Hertz. So Hertz was number 1, they have your business, they expect your business, they're not going to work as hard as we do. So their unique selling proposition was, we will give you an exceptional car rental experience. USP is not always a slogan, but in this case, We Try Harder became the slogan as well. And their whole promotional and sales efforts were around that. So if you sit down to say, how am I going to sell a new product or a new service, you need to know who you're selling it to, and you need to know why you're unique. So here's a few more examples of the unique selling proposition. Colgate, the only toothpaste accepted by the ADA for protection against plaque cavities and gingivitis. This may not be true now, but you know, at the time, it's important that your unique selling proposition be true as well. The golf one, you can't read it, but they obviously had statistics to say that Max was going further every time. So their proposition was that the golf ball would go further. You can tell I'm not a golfer, by the way. I'm talking about that. And then the one in the corner, you got 30 minutes. So the Domino's was the first online pizza delivery. You could go online, you could order, and your pizza would be delivered in 30 minutes. And they were the only, at the time, the only ones who could do that. So really clear, really simple. This is why we're better and different than everyone else. Any questions from anyone? Please feel free to ask questions at any time. If we were in person and we had time, I would, at this point, I would get you all to get a paper and pen and work this out, get some ideas on paper of exactly who is your ideal client, or who are your top 3 ideal clients, and then what is your unique selling proposition. It's a really important first step. Once we have that, oops, I skipped one, sorry. You need your pitch. So pitch has changed a lot over time, and actually I read a story about Otis, who created Otis Elevators, who his pitch was actually to put an elevator shaft in the middle of a convention hall. And apparently, before there were consumer elevators, when elevators were only used to go move cargo up and down, not people, they would be known to drop. And so there was nothing to hold them up. So an elevator could drop, and it would be very dangerous for a person. And so Otis was the person who put a system so that there could be I don't know the mechanism, but so that it would have a slow fall, and that you could go, and it would take away the risk. And so people were still afraid of getting on an elevator. So he put this elevator in the middle of a convention hall, and he put himself in the elevator, and he put it at the top, and he had it drop. And everyone was terrified, but he dropped slowly, and he was safe. And so that was his pitch. Now, these days you'll hear elevator pitch, and you always think, well, it's your 30 seconds to give your story while you're in the elevator. But I found that interesting that there was actually an elevator pitch where he used an elevator to drop and shocked everyone and made his point, and then people felt safe. And there's lots of theatrical examples of people doing a pitch, especially now with entrepreneurs and tech companies, and being very theatrical and being very prepared and being very putting on a show. But a pitch doesn't have to be a show. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be in front of big investment people. A pitch can be at the water cooler. It can be in the hallway. It can be a formal meeting. It can be a PowerPoint presentation. But it always contains 3 things. And you'll find these 3 things named all differently depending on which book and reference you use. So I gave you 2 names for each of the 3 parts. The first part is knowledge. So knowledge is that this goes back to being knowledgeable when we said what a good salesperson is. So you have to be knowledgeable of what the benefit is. You have to know what you have to offer. What problem are you solving? What are the technical details? What is the important information about the product or service? And so that ties to the benefit. So sometimes you'll hear people not use the word knowledge, but they'll use the word benefit. Well, to know the benefit to the ideal client, you would need to have the knowledge of how the thing works. So if we have the knowledge, we know the benefit, then what's the value? And value links to feeling. So how do we want the person to feel? So what do we want them to know? How do we want them to feel? So technically there's a benefit, but if it doesn't have a feeling attached, people don't usually respond. And then what's the action? We have to ask them to do something. Sometimes we want them to pay money. Sometimes we want them to move a resource internally. Sometimes we want them to take a task away. Sometimes we want them to trade one thing for another. Sometimes we want their business when their contract expires in a year from now. Sometimes we just want another meeting. Sometimes the pitch is, I just need another meeting, or I need to be able to call you in a month, or I need to be able to check in again. So knowledge, what's the benefit? Feeling, what's the value? How am I going to feel when I have the thing? And then what's the impact or action? So if it's a problem, so your client has a problem, you have a product that will benefit them. It will have value. They will feel that it's worth giving up something to get the value, and they will do something. It will have an impact. So they'll take an action and it will have an impact. So the three things, if you just have technical knowledge, but there's no value and there's no feeling and you're not asking them to do anything, it's not a pitch. If you're all about feeling and there's no details, there's no technical knowledge, and there's no request to do something, again, it's not a pitch. And even if you have really great knowledge and it feels good and everyone's happy, but you let them walk away without asking them to do anything, life happens and that dissipates and there's no action. So good pitches will give you the knowledge, the feeling, and then you'll ask them to do something. So in the Daniel Pink To Sell Is Human book, the one that I talked about last time, they talk about the Fuller Brush Man. So the Fuller brushes, they're the best cleaning brushes ever. You're gonna have a feeling that you're safe and clean and that everything, there's no germs, you're safe here. And the action is, I have these 5 that you can buy today, and they're right here, because we're going back to an old version of salesman in front of you putting the brushes on the table. So really clear, easy steps. But like I said, the pitch is not always buy today. The pitch could just be getting to the next call. So the best way to build your pitch is to, in our own lives, we're pitched all the time. And so you will hear good pitches, and you will experience that in your home life, you will experience that at work, you'll see something that speaks to you. And so if you start to think, well, what was the knowledge, feeling, and action, and why did that work? Then you can help build up a case, and then you can use that to create your own pitch. Again, the pitch is going to the ideal client, and it's highlighting your unique selling proposition. To help further work out the pitch, we look at questions. So we know we have a product. We know it has some benefit to the ideal client. We know there's some reason we're better than others, but we don't know necessarily enough about the specific ideal client that we're targeting. That's when face-to-face selling happens. That's when you get in front of your target and you ask questions. So you have to create the questions. So you have to figure out what you need to know about the client so you can solve their problem. So the beginning is just pen and paper or computer, and you just write all the questions out. So I have a machine, a widget. It's going to help the client, but I don't know enough about their need, so I need to ask them, how big is the room they're putting the widget in? What's the output they need of the widget? How many people have to use the widget? How long have they had the one they have now? What would be different if they had a different one? And So you just start going with a long list of questions. Then you edit the questions and you make them stronger and you figure out what are the critical ones. You prioritize the questions. And then once you get down to sort of how big, how much, how many people, the really detailed questions like that, those are the questions that are, numbers. So it might be, the room is this big, 10 people use this. That's the kind of thing. But then when you get into the why questions, that's when you get the important information. So why? So, well, we've never put it in that room. Well, why? Well, because that room has one door and we wanted it in a room with 2 doors. Well, why? Well, because we want to have another way out of the room. Well, why? And usually there's a theory that the 5th why will get you the really good information. So you kind of sound like a 2-year-old because you're like, why? But sometimes what happens is as you're asking why, they're starting to come forward with the real information that they would never normally give you. And it will help you fit your solution into their problem, but it also helps them. Usually, often by the end of it, they're like, I never thought of that. I never realized that. So if you keep going, even if you get to 3 whys or 4 whys, they'll start telling themselves why things happen, and they'll see how the fit goes together. It's easier to do this with a real-life example, but if you try this with your product and you say, these are the things I need to be able to sell my product, these are the most important questions, and then these are the why questions that's going to get me into the details of how they've made their purchase in the past, and then you have to practice it. So you can practice it with, you can practice it on your own, you can practice it with a partner, but the saying of the questions out loud and the actual practice of asking the why and getting the information, it really works well. And this why, 5 why system is outlined in the Daniel Pink book, To Sell is Human, and it works really well. But the most important point is that we can have our ideal client, we can have our unique selling proposition, and we can even have our pitch. But the pitch just gets them interested. Then the questions come. And so the more questions you can ask, the more you can listen to their answers, the more they'll feel listened to, and you'll be able to address their specific concern. So that's a lot of information, and it's harder to visualize when you don't have the actual scenario, but once you get it into a scenario, it works quite well. So this can happen on the phone, face-to-face, in short meetings, in long meetings, in a PowerPoint presentation. It's to give the idea of how to do it. The scenario where you practice it can change, certainly. And then inevitably, you get to the end of your pitch, and you get to the end of the questions, and then you get to the next step. So sometimes you get the no. So no, we're not interested. No, we're not going to do it. No, we don't want it. And that's when, go back to the fear is they'll say no. So when you get to the no, it's important to know, for you to realize why they're saying no. Are they saying no, not right now? Are they saying no, not never? Are they saying no, not unless you do this? And then you can figure out what your next step is based on the reason they're giving you the no. This is where resilience and buoyancy come in. And so when you get a lot of no's, when you're going and pitching and you're going and you're asking and you're getting no, it's hard to stay positive, but it's very important. So through this series of getting in front of the customer, making the pitch, asking the questions, and getting the no, immediately after that, it's important to give yourself feedback. So you look at what happened. What do I think I was strong? Where did I lose them? Exactly what happened? And write as much as you can specifically to feedback for yourself. That's in the moment. Generally, the most important thing that I think salespeople do to keep themselves resilient is keep a positive experience file. So whether that is a customer testimonial, whether that's a thank you card, whether that's an award, an official award, a month where you had all kinds of good closes, a promotion, maybe you left an employer and they gave you a going away card. it might sound silly, even emails that said good job, like some of your best career moments will have been recognized by somebody. And if you keep those, how big or how small, whether it's an email from your neighbor at your next office over, or if it's the president of the company, those positive experiences are what you need to look at when you feel that things are pushing you down and you need to be resilient. So we can build up our resilience muscles by reminding ourselves of our strengths and by using that specific feedback. So knowing when you're talking to yourself, oh, I know where I dropped the ball, or I know how I did that, or if I had used my listening strength, or if I had used this other strength, then I would have done better. So the specific feedback, the constant collection of positive feedback, and then the changing in the way you self-talk on a regular basis. So when it's time to make another call or another visit, you don't say, I can't do this, I can never do this. But you also don't really say, I can do this. So, you know, self-talk is often, you're smart enough, you're pretty enough, you're strong enough, you can do this, come on, you can do this. It has been shown that it is sometimes more powerful to say, can I do this? Can I do this? And so you're asking yourself, can I do this? Well, yes, because I know my ideal client, I know my target, I know my unique selling proposition, I know my pitch, I've practiced it and practiced it and practiced it, I have my questions ready, I can do this, I am prepared. So actually going through why you can do it, combined with an access to these positive experiences and specific feedback, it is some of the best ways to stay resilient when doing this kind of work. So there are others. There are many books on resiliency and buoyancy, but I think these are fairly easy, very small things that you can do, even if you're not making a big sales call, you're just having a bad day, these tactics will help. There is a positivity ratio website. I put the website on here, and Barbara L. Fredrickson is the author of the Positivity Ratio book, which is also an amazing book to read. But she gives a list of 10 positive emotions, and I think it's worth reading through them. Joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, awe, and love. So these 10 positive emotions have an immense ability to change our day-to-day life and our overall life. And without getting too mushy, the idea is that if we can bring one or two of these emotions into our day-to-day work, then not only do we feel better, but our work is better. And in the context of being resilient and being upbeat and having a good, positive voice and person when you're going to do your selling or moving or motivating, you will do all of that better if you are in a positive position. So if you have the interest, check out the website, but there is a recommendation she makes just to put this list of 10 somewhere in your workspace and keep a note of, did I feel joy today? Did I feel gratitude? Did I feel interest? You know, and so sort of tagging, or when's the last time I felt amused or was in awe of something? So it's a being self-aware of how you're feeling. So we talk a lot about being aware of our strengths. Which strengths do I have to bring to this selling work? But my strengths will work better for me and my company if I'm in a positive way. So I put this in here because I think it's worthwhile and it's interesting. So the next thing I want to address is the idea of upselling and cross-selling. And I think this is something that every industry looks at, but it's a little bit controversial now. So, you know, I actually heard on the way into work today, I heard a piece on CBC there. They said, when you call, I think it was a banking scenario, when you call to report your lost or stolen credit card, call center employees are being asked to upsell the individual at that moment. And I just heard the tagline for the article. I didn't get to hear it. But I think they were saying, you know, that's maybe not appropriate. When somebody's a little bit stressed out, they're calling to say they lost a credit card, and you're saying, you know, do you want to buy this extra thing so that next time when you lose your credit card that won't happen, or something like that. And of course, there's the classic, do you want fries with that upsell? But outside of sort of these obvious upselling techniques, most companies do still have an interest in upselling or cross-selling. So I already sell you product X, but I'd like to sell you product Y. Or I sell you product X, and our other division over here would be interested in selling you product Y. And so there's some company things you can do about, do we want to motivate people to cross-sell? Do we want to say that you actually get a percentage if you sell this person's service, or you refer, you get a referral fee? And then upselling, you know, there's also companies that will say, well, here's your baseline, and if you oversell to that existing client, you get this extra bonus. So it is sort of a huge section all on its own. But an idea that I wanted to bring up is that some people believe we should stop upselling and we should up service. So the question then is, what can I do, or what can we do for you that we're not going to charge you for to make your experience even better? Because we've talked about, or we're going to talk more about, the importance of keeping your clients happy and exceptional client service. So you're a client, you're buying from me, I appreciate that. I think your experience would be better if I give you this for free. And it's shown that if it's the right thing, and so the cost to you as a company is not that high, but the benefit to your client is huge, then you keep that client and you keep them very happy. So that's like a surprise benefit. But back to the traditional upsell, if you do have a product or service that you think your client will benefit from, the sort of standard is that you don't want it to cost more than 25% of the current purchase cost. So whatever they bought today cost $100. Well, if you have something that costs $25 or less and you want to ask them to add it on, then that's reasonable. If it costs more than that, most people will not go for it. So I've sort of split this into three things. There's upselling, okay, it costs $25 or less, do you want to add it on? And there's sort of a whole bunch of ways we could say that. You buy X, but Y, you probably buy Y, and if you buy it from us, we'll give you a discount. That's the cross-selling. And then the up service, which can be used in connection with both, is just that surprise product. So you hear about it in food service where it's, you go to your favorite coffee shop and they just say, oh, today's your coffee's free. It's just free, just today, no strings attached, it's just a free coffee. And some places give their frontline servers the ability to do that a certain number of times a month without having to ask anyone. So that does a few things. It empowers your employee, and it gives your customer a surprise benefit. So the surprise benefit, or the free upsell, is something worth looking into. And I'm not really giving this enough time, but it's a big topic all unto itself. I just wanted to introduce it here. This is probably not news to anyone, and it's not a quote, it's just what I think. It's always easier to keep a current client than it is to find a new client. So I tried to walk you through how you find a new client, but it's almost more important to keep your current client happy. So, you know, quote here, one customer well taken care of could be more valuable than $10,000 worth of advertising. So there's a few reasons for that. Happy client stays with you, but they bring you other clients. So the happiest customers will tell other people and will bring you clients, whether it's an official referral program or it's just such a good experience they have to tell other people about it. So how will you know what they think? Unfortunately, too many of us, we don't ask. Our client's happy, we check in with them, we ask them how they're doing, we ask how we can help, we give them good service, but we just don't ask them what they think. So we are assuming we know what they think of us in a lot of cases, but we really should ask, because that's your invisible pitch. All of your customers are pitching for you. They're either saying you're great and you should come in because this product and service is so great, or they're saying I had a horrible experience, never go to them. But if you don't ask, the vast majority of the public will not tell. There's always the 10% who will tell, but most people don't tell unless we ask. So with your good clients, ask for a testimonial. Ask, would you be willing to write 2, 3, 4 lines about your experience with us? It really helps for customers to have an example. Some people are very uncomfortable. They don't know what to say. So you can do it one way or another. You can say, here's some questions about the service, like a feedback survey. But it often works better just to say, here's a testimonial we had from another client as an example. Would you be willing to write about your experience with us today or your experience with us this year? And it doesn't have to be on social media or on a website or anywhere that it's written. The reason that I'm saying you should do this is so you have the information. So if it comes back to you in a personal email, you don't necessarily need to put it out on the whatever TripAdvisor, whatever the system is for public acknowledgement. It's not necessarily about that. It's about you knowing what they're saying about you and then tweaking your service to be even better. Or saying, oh my gosh, that's why they love us? Well, I got to make sure I do that for everybody else. And be as specific as possible. And for the ones that you get the feeling, oh, they really want to talk about it, then just get more and more and more and keep that feedback for yourself. And the referral, again, there are a lot of official referral programs and products, and maybe you already have those. But even without an official program, once you're in a trusted relationship, ask the client, are there other people who could use this product? A lot of times they'll be happy to tell you, and they just don't think of it unless you ask. Or could I ask you to share this with someone by the end of this time? So as specific as possible. And again, this can happen internally too. So our experience on this cross-functional team, it's been really great for me. How has it been for you? Can you answer these 2 questions about how this team project, this cross-functional team project went? The more we ask for feedback, the more we'll know from either our internal customer or the external customer, and the more we know, the better we can make the service experience. And then I put it in bold because I think it's the most important, is show gratitude. We have to actually think about how to show gratitude and how gratitude would work best for that client. It's not always the same. So there's a whole other presentation we could give on gratitude, but it is important. And then Walt Disney really said it best, do what you do so well that they'll want to see it again and bring their friends. And that's the bring your friends is really the important part there. So the questions, the feedback, again, I can't emphasize enough, it's great to use it publicly on your website or in your materials, but it's a rich, rich gold mine of information for you to go back and provide an even better experience. And the more you talk to your client, the more opportunities you have to get to know them, the more you can target their experience, and the happier they are, the more they'll come back, and the more they'll tell other people about it. And the idea of customer loyalty, we used to talk about a customer for life, but with the speed and the way and the opportunities in the web and what's available to people, we're really looking at the next transaction. So we'd love them to be a client for life, but we just want to make sure that they're coming back really happy next time, all the time, every time, and that they're bringing others with them. So I wanted to loop that in to say, okay, going back to the beginning, we know what we have to sell, we know who we're selling it to, we know what's unique about us, and then we craft our pitch based on all of those things put together. We practice our pitch, we ask questions to refine our pitch, and then we deal well when we get the no, we're resilient and we know how to deal with it, and we go back out again. And when we get the yes, we make sure our clients know how much we appreciate them, and we ask them for feedback on a regular basis. And that is a very brief overview. I struggled more with this presentation, and I hope that it has been helpful. These are big, big topics, and so I'm trying to scratch the surface. There's a lot more detail on every subject that was covered today. But with that, if you do have questions, please speak up or type them in the chat. I've been talking a lot, and I'm sorry there wasn't more interaction, but it feels like it was a lot to put out there for you. So if you do have questions, let me know. If not, I appreciate your interest in being with you today. Seems that there are no questions, so thanks again.